Good morning, Mets fans, and happy Monday. Welcome to Driving with Mr. Met. I am Mr. Met, and the Mets last night, in a really fun game in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, defeated the Phillies behind, yes, the pitching efforts of Jason Vargas. The Mets took the 5-game series from the Phillies 3-2, and now they head back to Citi Field to welcome in the San Francisco Giants for a 4-game set. I want to talk about the series with the Phils, and most importantly, I want to talk about Mr. Vargas. Last week, Mickey Callaway made some comments that I talked about here on one of my videos about Jason Vargas and the season, the unfortunate season that he's had. And I mean, by anyone's measure, he's been terrible this year. I don't know that anyone can argue that point. But what Mickey was sort of alluding to in his comments, and I mentioned this last week, was that he feels sort of badly about Vargas' season because Vargas has not really had a chance to get into any kind of a rhythm or a groove, because whether it was due to injury or just poor performance or rain or whatever, he's always very much like been start and stop, not because he wants to be, but because it's just been the circumstance of the season. And what Mickey was sort of saying was, hey, look, maybe when Vargas gets into a routine again, where he's pitching every 5th day, maybe we'll see the pitcher that we expected to see this whole time. And look, it's 2 games. I'm not getting like ahead of myself. Well, I guess I am, but I'm not meaning to get ahead of myself with this. But these last 2 starts, he's looked good. He's looked like the pitcher that the Mets wanted to get when they signed him to the 2-year deal last offseason. And you know, putting Corey Oswalt in the bullpen in favor of Vargas, keeping Vargas in the rotation, is a risky move, because yes, you owe Vargas the money, okay, and that you're not getting the money back. But you know, Oswalt has a high upside, certainly a higher upside than Vargas has. We know what Vargas is, even if he's performing the way he's supposed to. He's a crafty lefty who's going to give you 5 to 6 innings of 3 to 4 runs allowed when he's right. Okay, with Oswalt, we really don't know what we have in him. You know, we get to see him every now and then. He's looked good his last couple of starts. I would love to see him get more turns in the rotation, but the team made the decision, you know what, we're going to stick with Vargas. We're going to ride this out for the rest of the season. And you know, 2 starts, but it's worked so far. And maybe what they'll find in these last 6 weeks or so of baseball is that Vargas is going to be able to contribute next year. Maybe they'll find that in these last couple of weeks. That would be ideal. You know, that would be great. So again, the Mets took 3 out of 5 against the Phillies, and last night did so with an offensive barrage that included a whole crapload of singles. I mean, I think they had 12 singles in the game, but in the second inning they had 5 consecutive base hits, or 5 base hits and a sacrifice bunt in the mix, where they scored 4 runs, and that was awesome. I mean, it was nice to see small ball being played. I'm really liking the way that Rosario's season is unfolding, and the way that he seems to be getting a little bit more aggressive on the bases. He tried a couple of times last night to steal. He's looked really good. He's looking like the player we long hoped he would be, and it's looking like he's turning into that in front of our eyes, and that's awesome to see. I'm also really enthused about Jeff McNeil and watching him develop as well. I think the Mets have something in McNeil. I continue to be impressed by his defense more than anything else. Because I think the book on McNeil had always been like, yeah, he might be a good bat, but I don't know that he's got a position. You know, he might be a utility infielder. That's like, great, the Mets need another one of those, like they need another first baseman at this point. But McNeil's been proving in his brief time with the Mets that he can play a pretty capable second base. He's made a couple of really nice plays, and you know, the double play thing where he didn't get out of the way of that slide the other week from against the Yankees, I guess it was a week ago today, Brett Gardner that little takeout slide that was perfectly fine, wasn't a dirty slide, but McNeil didn't get out of the way. These are the sorts of things that he'll learn on the job, and he seems to be a pretty smart player, so I'm liking what he's bringing to the table as well. Last night we saw the return of Dominic Smith, who Matt Vasgersian kept referring to as a first baseman, but if you're a Mets fan, you sort of know that Dom's future is not at first base, at least not with the Mets. If Smith is going to stick, it's going to be as an outfielder, and boy, it's a crowded outfield, so I don't know what the future holds for Dominic Smith. He did have a double last night, an RBI double actually, as a pinch hitter, but he's got to establish himself as an everyday player with his bat, because his glove is not going to get him in the lineup at all. I don't care how good he is at first base. You cannot have a player at first base not making contact, batting 190. You just can't do it. And not that you can afford to have a guy like that anyplace else on the diamond, but it's more palatable when you stick a guy like that, for example, as a catcher or as a second baseman. But you don't expect that out of a first baseman. You expect 240 to 280 batting average. You expect a high on base percentage. You expect power. You expect a high slugging percentage. The OPS is a big factor with a first baseman. And I don't know that Dom Smith is going to be able to put up the numbers that would make him into that kind of a player. So again, although Vasgersian referred to him as a first baseman, I suspect we're going to see more of Dom Smith in the outfield. I just don't know if there's anything that Dom can do to get his career with the Mets back on track, because he'll have to leapfrog over Nimmo and Conforto to get some playing time in the outfield. That's saying nothing about the fact that the Mets have Juan Lagares coming back next year, who, despite the fact that he'll probably be injured by the middle of May, like he usually is, the Mets like Lagares, and he's a legit center fielder. So you might even say that Smith has to leapfrog over Lagares as well. You have Jay Bruce, who's going to be playing some right field and probably some first base, depending on what happens in the offseason. Cespedes is coming back. He'll certainly be playing left field, maybe some first base, who knows. But Dom Smith has a very, very tall task to make himself into something that could be of value to this team. I don't know that that's going to happen. That's why it's unfortunate that Dom's never been able to duplicate his early success in the minor leagues, because the Mets might have a legit trade candidate or trade chip in Dom Smith if this were 2-3 years ago, where he was, Baseball Reference top 100 or Baseball Almanac top 100 prospect guy, and certainly he's nowhere near that anymore. He's not a top 100 prospect, period. So the Mets kick off a 4-game set tonight with the San Francisco Giants, the struggling San Francisco Giants, I might add. So Zach Wheeler's on the mound for the Mets. Hopefully Zach can keep up his winning ways, and hopefully the Mets can continue to put up some respectable numbers. They've been playing 500 ball for the better part of the last month and a half. I think they're 23-23 over their last 46 games. Not good, but they're not as bad as they were in the month of June. That's the bottom line. And you always hear that old saying that a team is never as good as they look during a hot streak, the first 2 weeks of the season, or let's say the first month of the season, right? Let's say like April. And they're not as bad as they look during a slump, the entire month of June. They're somewhere in between. And for the Mets, right now, they look like they're a 500 team, and that's fine. It's better than being the 18-game under 500 team that they were in June rather. So my hope for the remainder of the season, my realistic hope for the remainder of the season, is for the Mets to play 500 or maybe a little bit better to sort of get further, closer to an overall 500 record. I don't suspect that's going to happen, realistically. But that would be lovely to see them claw back in and start taking series, start winning some series, start being a thorn in the side of these playoff teams who the Mets are going to be playing down the stretch this year. They don't play the Braves any longer, which is unfortunate, or fortunate, whichever way you want to look at it. But they do play the Phillies a couple more times, and the Mets could really ruin the Phillies' postseason hopes if they keep playing the way they've always played against the Phillies. So we'll have to see how that unfolds. So the realistic outlook for the remainder of the season, 500 baseball. The last thing I want to say, though, is that I'm not realistic. I'm optimistic, and many times stupidly and overly optimistic. But I was texting with my friend Mike Stauffer last night, and we were talking about this team and where they are now and how much better they've been playing. And I think we were both joking when we said, what if this team went on like another 12-1, 12-2 run? Again, it's completely unrealistic, but it got me thinking. And again, I think we were joking, but I'm not sure that I was. So I'm thinking maybe in the back of my mind, there's a chance. There's a chance that this team can recapture some of the magic they found at the beginning of the season, and that Todd Frazier can bring back the old salt and pepper, and I don't know, maybe the Mets can sneak into a 500 finish for the season. That would be fantastic. Again, very unlikely. It's not going to happen, but we can hope. So that'll wrap it up for today. I will be back tomorrow to talk about this first game of the Giants series tonight. Until then, I appreciate your watching. Thanks very much. Follow me on Twitter at Mr_Mets. And as always, let's go Mets.